Good morning and welcome back to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett along with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and this is kind of a landmark show.
Well, it is. When you say we're here every week, we're here 700 weeks in a row. This is our 700th show, and we're all kind of startled about that and don't want to think too much about it because there may not be 701, you never know. But we're pleased to be able to bring you interesting shows week after week, and we have outdone ourselves this week.
Well, what we decided to do was we tried to think, what was show number 1 about? Because it was now a long time ago, and so we thought, well, that's a good idea for a guest.
Back to our roots.
Yeah.
We started with John Coyle, and we'll probably finish with John Coyle. If this show doesn't do it, one of them will. But we are very pleased to have John Coyle join us on our 700th show because he was here on show 1.
Yeah, we talked on that day about the trial of Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols and that issue. But he's a defense attorney and has an opinion on a wide variety of issues. So we're going to delve into this, that, and lots of other stuff on show number 700. Thank you for joining us here on The Verdict.
I've known I was going to be an artist since I was a little kid. I still have teachers that in grade school that still have my artwork. I think I told them something along the lines, this is keep that, it's going to be worth money someday. I'm Justin Mader, I'm an artist, and I'm Chickasaw. My muse is the Muskogean, Mississippian art. When I see that, my mind just fills up with bubbles of ideas. My big thing right now is shell carving, the shell gorgets. My work is refined more and more until I found my own rhythm. I also do metallurgy, where I've been acid etching copper and hammering copper to make a copper repoussé. You only have one chance to do it right, so it requires a lot of planning and thought and just patience. My Chickasaw heritage is the foundation of who I am. It's the roots of where I come from, and it inspires me as an artist and inspires the tenacity of never giving up.
Learn more about today's Chickasaws at profilesofanation.com.
It's a North American energy revolution. We're the fastest growing source of new oil and natural gas supplies in the world.
The shift to North American energy will create approximately 3 million jobs.
All that money we've been sending overseas, $400 billion a year. Imagine that staying in our economy. It's a game changer.
Real energy independence starts now. And it starts with Oklahoma.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers for show number 700, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
All I had to do to introduce our guest today is to go back to show 1 script and see what I said about John Coyle. I really didn't do that because I couldn't find show 1 script. I wouldn't know where to look for it. But anyway, John Coyle has been a longtime friend of mine. He's been a friend of The Verdict. This, in fact, is his 13th appearance on The Verdict. He's a well-known across the state and in the Southwest criminal defense lawyer. Did his law work at Oklahoma City University. He is a 40-year lawyer. Has tried cases all over the state of Oklahoma. He has had cases outside the state of Oklahoma. He's won numerous awards in the criminal defense bar, including the Clarence Darrow Award, awarded for his performance as a defense lawyer. He's a frequent speaker and legal analyst for radio and television, but more than anything else, he's a friend of ours and a friend of yours as viewers of The Verdict. John, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much.
Glad to have you.
It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad that you and Mick asked me to be here.
We overcame that first show and did 699 more.
Yes, we did. I mean, whoever had any idea? And
You didn't
you
kill us
guys
then.
look pretty good.
Don't kill us
You know,
now.
that was actually just a pilot. That was a pilot show. I mean, we didn't have a deal. We didn't know where that show would air, if it would ever air. It might just, you know, be something that we all watched on a VHS tape somewhere.
Well, it aired in part because of John and in spite of us.
I've had the opportunity to be on here with a lot of my friends, a lot of good prosecutors, judges, and others, and I've debated and agreed, and we've had a great time. It's a great show.
On that first show, we were at that time visiting the trial of Tim McVeigh, and it's been lost to history by most,
And Terry Nichols.
including me and Terry Nichols.
Yeah.
But John, you were originally assigned to defend Tim McVeigh. We're
Yes,
now
sir.
coming up, next April it'll be 20 years since the bombing occurred.
Yeah.
How often do you think about the bombing? How often do you think of your personal involvement with that short time of defense?
Almost every day, a lot. I hated to give that case up, and I had
Remind our viewers how that appointment came about.
well, I was appointed by the federal court, and they asked me to be his lawyer, and so I went out to Tinker. That's the time he came to Tinker on the helicopter. And I remember one of my sons was playing in a ball game, and I left. I went to Tinker, and it was pretty interesting to meet him, but I developed a bond with him. And then I learned several days later that a person who was a friend of mine had been killed in the bombing. And as a result of that, I felt like it was too much of a conflict with that serious of a case to continue.
Mm-hmm.
So I told the court about that, and then it took more than 30 days for them to find someone to replace me. And during that time, I did the preliminary hearing. I spent a lot of hours and hours out talking to Tim McVeigh, who was out in El Reno, is where they were holding him.
You must have, though, followed the eventual trial under Stephen Jones's.
Well, I followed everything. In fact, I worked for ABC News to cover the trial. And so I went out there and did that, and I went to Denver a lot, probably 15 times during the course of that long trial. And it was a very difficult day for me when Tim McVeigh was executed, in spite of what he had done and everything else. I'm a lawyer and a defense lawyer. That's what I've been all my life, and so I stick up for people, and you form a bond for somebody. When somebody's in that much trouble, it's hard not to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that chapter in my life.
That's one case that you were involved in. How many people have you defended through the years?
Oh, thousands. August 29th, I was a lawyer 40 years, and all I've ever done is defend people. So, and it's changed a lot. When I was first a lawyer, they didn't have the death penalty. It was unconstitutional. And they had real search and seizure, which the war on drugs has, I don't think many people understand this, has really eroded the Fourth Amendment. In other words, the protection against search and seizure. Now they just seem to search people whenever they want, wherever they want, and with little consequence a lot of the time. And that's one of the main things that's happened really in our system of justice.
And the McVeigh trial was a federal trial, and not that many attorneys have federal defense experience.
Well,
how did you develop that?
Well,
expertise?
I'll tell you exactly. I had a guy, an old guy's last name was Butler, hired me in Muskogee to try his case in federal court. And the first time we did it, we got a mistrial. I made a lot of good friends. And that was when they had a lot of defendants. And then they tried my guy a second time. And after the mistrial, and by some miracle, he was acquitted. And I had a good time. Furniture was more comfortable, and I liked the surroundings. So I just kept coming to federal court, and I'd get more cases, and somebody'd hire me, and then I'd get them, and once in a while I'd get appointed. And I've done a lot of them. My son Billy does a lot of appointments now. I do a lot of cases, not as many appointments, but people hire me to help them.
John, I know because we would see each other from time to time when you were doing this, but I know that you are considered, you won't say you are, but you are considered the premier criminal defense lawyer in the state of Oklahoma. And an example of that was your selection to teach criminal law to the new bar graduates just before they took, or the new law school graduates just before they took the bar exam. You taught criminal law to all the lawyers taking the bar exam for how many years?
8 or 9 years I've taught the bar review in criminal law and procedure at OU, and I really enjoyed teaching it. I did it twice a year, and it made me read all the new Supreme Court cases, and you know, I taught that course, and then I also taught them how to identify whether they were dumb in certain sections so they could really study on it. And I kind of developed a little system, and I had a lot of people tell me it helped them pass the bar. I don't know if they learned a lot of law, but I taught them how to take the test.
Let me harken back a little nostalgia here to our first show. You were asked a question. I'm summarizing. I didn't go back and review the pilot, but summarizing, you were asked a question about the topic really was, should Terry Nichols be tried in Oklahoma? This was after Tim McVeigh. And you predicted that Terry Nichols would get a fair trial when he was tried in Oklahoma. Tell us, how do you see that now, 20 years later?
I mean, undoubtedly he did. And the way that people who are accused get any justice in America, it starts with a fair trial, not only in Oklahoma, but in every country. And Steve Taylor, who was a judge at the time,
now
he
on
gave
the
him
Supreme
a fair
Court.
Yes, sir. And in fact, I was on this show, I think, with Judge Taylor, and he gave him a fair trial, and hence a fair result.
You're not a politician, but you have political beliefs. Are your political beliefs the result of your work and what you've seen in your life experiences, or are your life experiences the result of your political beliefs?
Well, I think that what I have done in my life as a lawyer has affected my politics. It has made me much more liberal than I would have probably otherwise been. But I've seen how the justice system works and doesn't work, and some of the things I'm really disappointed about that have happened in the time that I've been a lawyer.
John Coyle is our guest today on The Verdict. We're going to take a break and be right back.
We'll come back.
You're watching The Verdict.
Thank you.
When you have something important to communicate, it becomes clear that there's a lot of competition for your audience's attention. So how can your message stand out and actually resonate with your audience? Legal Graphics has the answers. The team at Legal Graphics will work with you to plan, design, and even test your presentation to ensure your message will be heard and remembered. Call Legal Graphics today to schedule an appointment. The readiness is all.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Thought we'd have a guest on who appeared on our first show 14 years ago, John Coyle. Kent?
John, as we broke, you were just getting ready, I think, to tell us a little bit about some of the changes you've observed over the years, some that pleased you, some that have not pleased you. Can you kind of summarize that for our viewers?
Well, I think that it's mainly in the don't please, And I'm kind of ashamed. I mean, it's all the defense lawyers have tried for years to do something about the war on drugs. All it's done is lock people up, and drugs are more plentiful and cheaper than they were 30 years ago. So something different's got to happen with drugs. We've had all sorts of suggestions of treatment programs and other things that have been pretty much ignored. And over the time that I've been a lawyer, the mandatory minimum sentences and you get more time in federal court if you go to trial and lose than if you plead guilty. You get extra incentive. And sometimes it makes a 50% difference in a sentence, which is a huge consideration for someone who's going to have to do the time.
Have you seen any discernible difference in the number of cases that are pled out as opposed to tried over the years? Is that about the same, or is it changing?
No, it's not about the same at all. I mean, we used to try a lot of cases in federal court. We don't try as many anymore because of that disparity. Yeah. And it's mainly because of that we don't. Sometimes there are just cases you have to try, but not as often. So I try 1 or 2 a year now. I used to try 4 to 6 a year. So it's a lot less. And that's not only in federal court, it's in state court too. The disparity, the sentences, the legislature keeps upping the ante. And what they do is not just punish people more. A lot of cases, you can't take the risk. For some guy that used to would get 3 years if you lost, he's now going to get life. So in those situations, you just can't roll the dice against life. You've got to
plead it.
Yeah. You've got to plead it, and so it takes away from him the opportunity to have a jury decide.
We've come a long way in DNA evidence and presumably scientifically doing a better job of determining potential guilt or innocence in that regard. How has that affected your job and your reaction to that advancement?
Well, I mean, I like the advancement, and I think all good defense lawyers like it. It certainly has eliminated some clients of mine from consideration where they would not have been but for the DNA. They would not have been exonerated but for certain cell phone calls or texts or other things that help set them apart. It's not just what someone says now. There's scientific evidence to back it up. So, I mean, it works both ways with the science, but sometimes it works in our favor.
One thing that wasn't present, I don't think, in Oklahoma when you were on our very first show was the Innocence Project at Oklahoma City University. I know you've been affiliated with that, or at least been involved with that over the years. How do you see those kinds of programs?
I think that I think Larry Hellman, who was the dean of OCU, has done a fabulous job with the Innocence Project. They've helped a lot of people already, and they'll help a lot more. They had a big fundraiser party thing last Friday night, and had a huge crowd, and they had, I want to say, like 39 people who had been exonerated through either DNA or some sort of false identification issue, things like that.
People generally get their opinions about what your job is like and what trials are like by pop culture. They've seen movies, or they've read Grisham books, or they watch Perry Mason.
Sure.
What sort of misconceptions do all of those examples provide people?
I think the system, pretty much the system often, or the media, depicts the more serious criminals. I've just found in my law practice there are very few evil people out there. Most of them are people who make really serious mistakes in their life because of a lot of other conditions, drugs, alcohol, affairs, all sorts of different things come into play. And I have not met very few evil people in my life.
In typically the last scene, or nearly the last scene of a Perry Mason episode, there's some sort of conclusion, some sort of grand testimony that changes the complexity of the case. Has that ever happened in a trial?
Yes.
You've seen that?
Yes, sir.
What happened?
I've had it happen to me. And it was some evidence that the government brought out, and I had talked to their chemist before, and I knew it was a sex crime case, and I knew that it could not have happened if they found this thing called acid phosphatase. It could not have happened. And they found it, and I guess the prosecutor never asked him that question. But when I asked him, I still remember his name. His name's David Cornucopia. He's an honest agent, and he's now in California. But he answered my question, and it really helped exonerate my client. That was in a court martial at Tinker, where I have defended people over the years.
How has social media affected the practice of criminal defense law, if at all?
Well,
Google, Twitter,
sure. It's
texting.
It's taken a lot of he said, she said out of it. Because everybody wants to, they don't just talk, they want to send a text about it, you know. And either good or bad.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like DNA. It works both ways. And some of it hadn't been good. But really, it's you're not a competent lawyer unless you have everybody's social media that's involved in a case investigated. Because until you mine those various Facebook and other things, you have no idea how interesting some of the things are that you find.
John, I don't do criminal work, and there are a lot of folks out there that are charged that are grateful for that. But in civil practice, I know how expensive it is to do that kind of data mining of cell phones and email accounts and the like. If you have to do that in a criminal trial, has that dramatically increased the cost of a defense?
No, it's the same thing. They just have a different thing to investigate. There's something that's easier to investigate. For those we have in Oklahoma County and in Oklahoma City Federal Court, we have incredibly competent public defenders too.
Yeah.
So they don't have the resources that sometimes private lawyers have when people hire us, but they sure got a lot of good lawyers, and they work really hard.
Currently an issue that Oklahoma City is working on, and almost every municipality across the country is at least considering, and that's cameras on police officers, with the idea that they could record exactly what took place during, you know, some sort of arrest or other activity.
Yeah, the kind they wear on their shirts.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I'd like to see that done more, and obviously police violence against citizens is out of control in America. And I'm not sure all the reasons for that. I think police work attracts a different kind than it did 30 years ago when I was first a lawyer.
Should an officer have to inform the person that they're wearing a camera on their body when they're interacting with someone?
Well, I mean, if everybody wore them, then everybody ought to know they have them on. And I don't know if they really have to tell them. People, I mean, they act pretty crazy when they're confronted with police. They think about getting locked up. People do and say a lot of crazy things.
Yeah. Well, we've run out of time, John, but thank you for coming back on.
Well, thank you all very much for having me.
We'll have you back for the 1400s.
I look forward to it. If we're all still around, we look okay. I don't want to see the picture of 14 years ago, I'm afraid to. But,
I went back and looked at it, and that's why I didn't bring it.
Kit and I'll have a final word after this. John Coyle, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I think for us, once we got started and we began to see the tremendous need just within our state, it really was just a calling for us. The blessings far outweigh any obstacles that we've faced.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
We are back on The Verdict, wrapping up show number 700. Our guest was defense attorney John Coyle.
Yes, we titled this show, and we didn't even bring it up during the course of the show, Hogwash, 700 shows later. That's hogwash, not hogwarts. But that was a phrase that John used on our very first show that broke everybody up. I thought we were probably not going to be able to continue with the show when he characterized one of the other guest answers as hogwash. And we haven't topped that since. But it's always good to have John back on, always good to see him. He continues to be the outstanding criminal defense lawyer in Oklahoma.
And there is information on your screen forthcoming about John's website. We typically give website information, and coylelaw.com is John's website. You can get information about his firm. And of course, we have a website. We'd love for you to go on that website and tell us about a guest you'd like to see or a show you'd like to see discussed.
Or if you just want to say hogwash, that's okay.
the website is theverdict.tv, theverdict.tv, and that's going to do it for show number 700, partner.
Yes.
Way to go.
700 to go.
700 to go. We'll see you next week right here on The Verdict.